Nice.
I forgot to get my other computer, so this takes a little longer than it normally does.
I see. 1, 2.
Watch out for the intro music, it's loud.
Okay.
Oh, I can't spend the nose. Oh, can you tell me who? Did you see it? I'm glad stopping by. Take him to him, baby. Take him up again.
I always forget that the speaking audio still comes in over top of the music for the listeners, and this is normally where I bring up subjects I shouldn't on the internet, but I've learned my lesson. Not to mention, the listeners of this show support me wholeheartedly, regardless what kind of deep topics I get into. So,
No matter what you say.
no matter what I say. Check your mic again for me.
1, 2, 1, 2.
What the hell happened there? Give me 1 sec.
One, two, 1, 2. Hey, hey, hey. Ooh. Ooh, there it is. Sounds good.
There it is.
Shure SM7B.
Sure, SM7B.
Classic.
Now I'm bouncing between the cloud lifter and whatever you call that. Actually, no, I got the doohickey. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I see that. I see that
the
little...
femoral artery, whatever that is. Dude, so why would you make a microphone that requires an additional 10 dB of gain just to be like audible in the slightest?
I don't know. But I've never used one of those before. I feel like I can just
FETs or whatever.
Yeah. I don't have any of those. But you can just crank the knob. That's what I've done in the past.
Yeah, just if you got nice enough preamps, you shouldn't have to worry about what you find at plus 10 dB, right?
Yeah, they're always these dynamic ones are always quiet.
Yeah, well, it's just a weird thing to really get into the nitty gritty about, like. So, well, let's start a little bit more basic. You are one of the founding members and team members at Legacy Soundworks over in the beautiful. Is it technically Milford? Or is it technically Indian Hill?
Technically, it's Sims Township, I believe.
I'll strike that from the record.
Yeah. But it's like sandwiched between Loveland and Montgomery and Indian Hill.
Cool.
And yeah, it's like Sims Township.
And it's a perfect little street corner there that the first time walking through, I'm blown away by all the things about the facility, especially the fact that you can just stay there for a couple of days and make this record perfect, and you can walk over to that little gas station deli and feel like an American, you know what I'm saying?
For sure, yeah.
Nothing says freedom like cold cuts and an intersection that like you probably shouldn't walk through, but you should walk through.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't, but it sure is fun.
Yes.
It sure is fun to do it.
You got to smoke your full pack before, but you have 1 cigarette left, and that's for the walk across the intersection.
Yeah.
How do you feel the danger?
Yeah, I feel like one might not be quite enough to get you all the way across, but it'd do the job.
Yeah.
It'll hold you over for a minute. It's good too that we have 2 right there, so that there's a little bit of competition, so that they can't gouge us on any particular.
They start to sniff out your business model.
Yeah.
And
try to get off in like orange juice and like chocolate milk and other things that we probably shouldn't.
Strictly peanut M&Ms.
Yeah.
You know, the real dream.
Whatever you're not supposed to drink right before you sing, that's mostly what we buy.
That's what we're buying, baby. Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of pops up out of nowhere on that corner. And I have more questions later on for finding the space and all that. But let's go back to just microphones. Because you would be described as an audiophile, correct? I mean,
I guess so.
It's borderline pornographic to watch someone take the capsule out of mic.
I would say not exactly. I really like music. I really like music and making it. And the rest of it is kind of just like, how do you do that?
Okay.
That's kind of my philosophy. I like things that sound good. So like seeing something that does sound good, or like working with a really high-end piece of equipment, it's like I have a lot of respect for the people that make that happen. But like, as far as like me getting into a microphone and like designing something, or like getting a soldering iron out and getting super specific with the electricity of my outboard gear, like I don't know how to do any of that. I don't have any immediate plans to learn.
Yeah.
But I do know what the things that I have available to me sound like, and I just use.
Yeah. Well, like I always tell people, there's a really special relationship between you and an engineer, whether it's a live or a studio setting, because they are the medium in which your message will travel through to get to somebody. And especially when you're doing a shootout on microphones, it's just you and someone in the booth, and trying to say which of these capsules and configurations is going to best convey you, and what is that difference? What is that minutia? And you spend a career getting to know the tools at your disposal and not being obsessed with what they are, but how they are used.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you kind of get into the career path of being on that side of the board versus just being a great songwriter and vocalist yourself?
I guess it just kind of became another skill that I could add to my skill set. I kind of fell into audio engineering because I wanted to write music, and I wanted to record it and just like produce music and make songs and stuff, like for my own self. And then as I learned more and more and more about it, as I began to accumulate a little bit of like my own personal gear, like, you know, became something that I, you know, was able to make a little bit of money at.
And how old are you when you're first like starting to take it out to market?
This is like 2018, so I'm what, 23, 22, when I just like first learned anything about audio engineering in the first place. Just did a few freelance things here and there, and then got my formal education at a recording workshop in Chillicothe.
I've heard really good things about that. I know Aaron Coburn's gone there, and a great handful of other engineers. And that's like an all-inclusive 6 months. You know what?
It's like 7 weeks. Like you do it everything really, really quickly, and they work you like 12-hour days, and you go and you live on campus. And it's very hands-on kind of experience-based stuff. Like there are lectures, but most of the work is done like in the studio behind the board. They've got like 5 studios that they just shuffle kids between. And
when you compare and contrast that with folks that did the 4-year bachelor's degree in engineering, do you feel like there's a competitive edge to 7 weeks of borderline hell and havoc?
I think there is, because I don't know if it takes 4 years of like academic like style schooling to make somebody a serviceable like audio engineer or recording engineer. Like you need to know a lot of like facts about, you know, just audio in general and how signal flows and how the signals work together and to make it like work in the first place. But after you learn that, it's pretty much just hands-on experience in real life. I feel like that makes you better. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, there may be a bunch of things that I never got the chance to learn that are really holding me back, but I'm not aware of what they are at this current point. I feel like the 7-week program worked fine for me.
Yeah. Well, and from my experience with being in there, you're not only very competent, but you're confident in the process that you're trying to utilize with people. And I feel like much more than it is the equipment or it is the style, it is the person and how they make you feel when that microphone, that red light turns on. Because that's a syndrome of inferiority for what you normally do. When you see that light come on and you have to question, is this going to be the last take? You know, and there's a bit of fear when it comes to that. Like in my one experience with being in your booth, there's 5 takes of this song, and by take 6, I'm like, I'm gonna get it, and someone else is like, why don't you back up for a second? Because the magic normally happens in 1 through 3, right? And then maybe we refine things in 4, 5, 6 through 20, but it's hard to hand that over to someone that's in your chair and I say, pick what's best.
Yeah.
You know, and to not feel hindered by the vanilla folder of bullshit you just got handed and how you make something special out of that. Mm-hmm. So you come from a family of musicians and engineers. Like, you have that great picture of your dad sitting behind a board that looks more like a fourth grader and like too small of a school desk at this point. Like, the technology curve is fucking bizarre to think about in that.
Yeah.
So it was you, your pops, and your brother that built that space?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, my mom as well. My mom doesn't do, like, music stuff, but she was, you know, kind of instrumental in getting the house portion of it together. She did most all of the decision making as far as the house, the attached house to the studio goes. And, you know, just helped us communicate with everybody as well. But
yeah, and is this like a drunken Christmas discussion that turns into the studio, or like when
it might
does
as
the
well
idea?
have been. I feel like
Eggnog's running low and people are high-fiving, and you're like, what are we really doing here?
Yeah, I think my dad just like he had been, obviously you saw that picture, he had been recording since like the early 90s or maybe 80s. I don't exactly remember when it was precisely that he started. But my mom was the one that worked out of the two parents. So he was a stay-at-home dad. And yeah, so he did a lot of music stuff when we were really young. And then over the course of just kind of raising us and driving us all over the place, he had a little bit of a home studio, but it wasn't anything crazy. He kind of figured out that when we left the house and my mom was getting ready to retire, there would be enough time to like maybe get like a real one together. And then me and my brother were doing like professional music stuff, and I was in Nashville, he was in LA, and we just somehow we figured out that we knew how to do this. And we were like, let's just try it. And then we did it, and it worked, which is crazy.
Well, it's pretty magnificent compared to most of the things you see in Cincinnati, and kind of hearing that cross between an LA studio and a Nashville studio, like, you really did nail that. It has the feng shui and the freedom of feeling like I don't know if I'm on vacation or if I'm in somebody else's kitchen right now.
Wow.
But it's homey. It feels like it's kind of modular. You can move things in that way, but it's just, it has a level of cleanliness that makes me feel like I can run amok in here and know where we're ending up.
Well, that's good. I hope it remains clean.
It won't.
Going forward.
Look
No.
at yourself in the mirror. Come on.
It's not clean normally, actually, because it gets used. But I know what you mean. It has like a little bit of like a minimalist sort of naturalistic design to it that I think it helps trick you into thinking that you're outside when you're not outside. Like, it has kind of a high ceiling, a lot of wood everywhere.
Yes.
A lot of glass, so it makes you feel like you're looking out of a window, but it's a window into another room.
Yeah.
That's also inside.
And so much of the world is turned towards the home studio thing, and like, so all three of you kind of battled with commercial spaces versus home spaces, and you kind of built this in between that has a lot of potential for types of clients and types of spaces. But what do you feel like is the ideal customer experience when someone comes in there?
Just to feel comfortable and feel like you can make the music that you want to make, and just go at your own pace. It looks totally different for every client. Some people come in and they want to just be like extremely hyper efficient with their time, and they have like prepared a punch list of things that they want to accomplish specifically throughout the course of the session. And it's like, yeah, sure, we can totally do that if that's how you want to do your session, if that's like what you've prepared for and that's what makes sense for your project. Love to do that. But there are some people that literally just hang out for 40 minutes, and then all of a sudden, once they get in there, you get like 5 songs done or whatever. So it's totally, it just kind of being able to read people and adjust to what's appropriate. And also, obviously you want to get stuff done, so knowing when to kind of let people's processes take place is very interesting, because it's always totally different from person to person.
Has that been a tough learning curve? Because you seem like a very articulate, intentional person. So waiting for someone else's, car to kind of hit the speed that they want to move at, especially when you are talking about precious time in this space that you've really put your heart and soul into, and you're watching a guy pretend like he's getting off the couch and sink back into a little bit deeper, and it's like, I don't know to tell you to get a move on or to come sit with you on that couch right now.
Yeah, I would say it sounds like it's been hard, and it's been, I would say, complicated and like a complex thing to describe. But I would say in order of like to execute it, it's been pretty easy, because somehow you can just kind of tell. I don't know. It just kind of comes, and it's like, oh, this person is in this mode right now. Like, I've seen enough of them to know if like, and even sometimes if there's like tension in a room between two people that aren't me, like just learning when to let them do what they need to do, or learning to step in with like a third thing that is hopefully not flying in the face of any individual point, but like is just another thing to discuss.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to let people like have that tension, but other times like you can just alleviate it. Just a little bit.
Yeah, but what a weird thing to have to navigate as a producer and as an engineer, where it's like, I feel tension about this part of the arrangement, or just like the hierarchy of the band. And almost like a good coach in a sport, there's moments where it's like, I want to put you two head to head for this thing to come out on top, because the competitive edge is there in a really positive way. Mm-hmm. Or one of you's going to go sit in that corner, the other one's going to sit in that corner, and both your moms are going to come pick you up, because this is starting to get weird out here. And you have to really walk that line in consideration of the project, which we're all caught up enough in our own feelings that like the ego may be sitting at the front and driving this thing, but what we are all here for has nothing to do with that feeling. Like we're still on the same page, we're just not,
Yeah, for sure.
Has being in that situation of driving the bus and making sure everyone gets on and gets off at the same time, and then kind of walking out the studio, has that stimulated you to be more creative in your own personal material, or has it kind of driven a wedge between your work life and your personal creative life?
Somehow it's both, because like it's definitely true that I can't, like I don't feel like I have as much time as I would want to like do my own performances or do my own compositional work. But at the same time, when I do, because of all of the people that I'm around that are so inspiring, and the fact that I do get to work with really talented composers and writers a lot, the material that I do have a chance to sit down and write, it's kind of clicking a little bit more. So it's like there's less time. I don't really have as much bandwidth really to think about it, but there's this thing that I'm finding to where it's like when I actually do just kind of sit down and do the like kind of baseline creative work that we all enjoy much more than the tedious like connecting dots type of creative work, that stuff it's feeling newer and fresher than it has in a while. So
yeah,
there's something to find there. I don't know.
It's almost subliminal in that way.
Yeah.
It's like folks come in with a hot iron and they're ready to do something with this thing. Mm-hmm. And you find yourself like slowly heating up kind of in the background. Like you don't realize that. Well, one thing I've experienced in my own recording life is by the time I finish a project, I've learned so much that I kind of want to go back to the beginning and redo that, because I feel like I know it better. Yeah. Versus stepping away and doing someone else's project, you can learn those efficiencies and those inspirations and kind of these neurological pathways of how to think and how to act. Mm-hmm. And then that comes storming back into your life. And it's almost like 3 weeks of work that you put onto someone else's fed into the month-long project that now you can do in 48 hours because you're just maniacally entertained by making it happen again for your own thing.
Absolutely. That's such a good way to describe it. I feel like that is like exactly kind of how it feels. It's much harder to toil away on your own music and learn all of the things about finishing music on your own music than it is to like learn 5 different processes from 5 different, completely different people that you're able to implement or at least facilitate in their projects, and then bringing it back to yours. Like it's a cool thing.
Yeah. Was there a particular session recently that you felt like was the most like path altering? You know, like what the biggest change in workflow that's occurred with a client in the last year or so?
Yeah, I feel like so lately I've been working with Aaron Ray, who is a singer, and he's brought through a lot of really cool people, and just the process of working with him and all of, you know, the amazing people that he's brought through. I've learned a lot about working in a specific context, which is like a lot more like on the grid, like loop based sort of recording and arrangement too. I've learned a lot by watching those guys work. But yeah, before that, I mean, most of my recording experience had been like, you put up mics in a room and the instrumentalists play the instruments. And yeah, sure, like I can edit and stuff, but like most of the stuff that I had been working on had been like jazz or classical or rock and roll, stuff that's not necessarily played to a click, stuff that isn't loop based, stuff that's like a lot more, you know, arranged, and, you know, more player based. And
yeah. And what DAW did you end up landing on for the loop based stuff?
still Pro Tools.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not doing a whole ton of MIDI stuff because like we have a studio with a lot of instruments, so like
yeah,
you can kind of get away with doing the MIDI work at home and just bringing in any kind of loop or beat and just building on top of that with like our stuff here.
Yeah.
At the studio. So
the way I've kind of worked with, like, you know, I use the looper a lot in my day-to-day given life, but when I come into here, it's much less that. But the place I would relate most to that idea is like when a guitar solo appears in a section, I'm going to take that 8 bars or so, or 16 bars, and put it on a loop and play over it for 10 minutes. So then I can write a solo out of these parts, learn that, then play it back. Is it similar to that kind of fashion of giving someone the freedom to find something special?
Yeah.
Capturing it, bottling it, rolling it over, kind of a deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the process that I'm kind of new to, that I'm sort of describing. Yeah, you throw down a loop, like you have like an artist or a drummer like play, you know, like 5-10 minutes of ideas, and then you find one thing that loops really well, and it could be 2 bars. Then you just find the tempo of that, loop that 500 times, put a bass in somebody's hand,
yeah,
you know, and then chop that up, loop that, you know, come up with different sections, you know, if there's different chord structure, you know, save all that stuff and just like assemble that together. But like you can let people improvise for 40 minutes and then take, you know, what they do and make a song out of it, like pretty easily. Has
there been an instrument group that you found most interesting for how that process kind of flipped the context on its head?
Like what instruments? I would say, I mean, probably vocals for me. Watching people just go into the booth and just spit and improvise like their stuff for like a long time over the same groove. It's like, man, I would put pen to paper, but like that's not what everybody does. So like seeing people that don't do that is like, it's a cool thing.
Absolutely. I was talking to someone about that the other day, and like I told you about this last time we worked together. Like I'm recently sober for 6 months, and that's brought up like different issues with writing because there's so much of the conscious mind that is self-critical and kind of self-loathing in that. And so I find the intentional free-form, freestyle kind of writing to be this active thought of, I don't want to think about it before it gets here. And in these marathons of 40 minutes of spitting with almost zero dynamic, you find these natural ramps and ebbs and flows that have brilliance that you wouldn't be able to articulate on pen to paper. But when it comes time to edit, now you must go pen to paper.
Sure.
Now you must.
Of course.
I don't know why you said that cereal needs hot sauce, but it kind of had something sexy about it. So let's back up. Cinnamon Toast just got Frank's, and I get you put that shit on everything, but it sounds disgusting. So let's dive in deeper. Do you find yourself taking on that role too of saying, I think lyrically you had something special here. Let's develop the idea.
I do try to, against my very nature, I do try to stay out of lyrics completely. Like that's, so I normally I'm hired as an audio engineer and a studio manager for sessions, right? Sometimes I'm hired as a producer, but not all the time.
Yeah.
So if I'm not hired as a producer, or if there's somebody else in the room that is hired as a producer, I would love to say things about lyrics, but lyrics are they're so personal and individual to what the artist is doing and like who they are, that it's like, man, like there's certain things that like as an audio engineer, like unless you really, really feel like it needs some help, like you probably shouldn't go there. I will definitely help people with like vocal performance things in the booth if it seems like they're working on something and like I have like an idea of like how in their technique they could nail something that they're literally sitting in front of me trying to do. So like I can try to help them in that way. I've gotten, really good feedback from artists in that sort of process. There are certain things that I'll say in playback of what we just recorded that like I'll offer, certain opinions. Nothing too, I'm never gonna insist on anything. I'm just gonna throw it out there, or throw the fact that I noticed something that maybe nobody else would have been responsible for listening for. Because I am an audio engineer, like I'm listening in a different context than what the musicians are doing. So I'll say certain things here and there, but I'm really careful. Like I don't want to like try to assert my musical voice when it's not appropriate, because that is so bad to do.
And I get that. I think one of the greatest things producers and sound engineers do is try to make their thumbprint as transparent as possible. It's like, you don't need to have my flavor on this unless you opt to. And like that kind of brings up a very important point, that some people hire you as an engineer not realizing that they're asking you to be the producer.
Yes.
And some people ask you to be the producer, meaning they want you to be the audio engineer. And
that's
you have to figure that out when you walk in there.
Yep.
Is that difficult, or is that similar to like I can kind of read you on the way in of
exactly.
Like, okay.
Yep, you had it. It's kind of just like, it sounds difficult. It's complicated. It's difficult to describe, but maybe with a few like moments of exception, it's been pretty easy to figure out what your role is. I don't know why. It just kind of rolls that way.
And you're clear enough that if it's in question, it's like, I don't need to beat around the bush here to say like, do you want my input or do you not want? Because both are okay.
Yeah.
But especially when it comes to like your ability and your musicianship, has there been moments where in playback, like you sing a run to somebody that they've been trying to do, and they're like, "Since when can you fucking do that?" Are people surprised by your ability from behind the? Okay,
for sure. Well, the thing is, it's like I feel like I might be wrong about this, but I feel like there are not a lot of like full-time audio engineers that would say that their main instrument is vocals. So like, that might be a little bit surprising for people, but like, singing lines to people as we produce the music so that I can make sure that we're on the same page, like literally just singing the music to them just so to confirm what we're talking about is something that I lean on really, really heavily just for an organizational tool. So I'll do that like without thinking about it, and then people will be like, "Oh, I didn't know that like you could sing." Like, that's crazy.
We didn't know you had that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess I really don't know any other engineers that are primarily vocalists, and like one of the worst things to experience as a vocalist in a booth with a producer is they're asking you to do something that they don't know how to articulate to you, and they're kind of embarrassed to even start it. So you end up saying feelings and ideas, but not being able to convey it. So now we waste another 40 minutes where I was supposed to be paying you, where you're supposed to be getting something done. And those are hard moments to really come to terms with after the session. Like there's nothing worse than closing the door and saying, "I don't know if we got it."
Yes, that is the worst. When people walk away and there's just like, man, like, I think I'm going to have to come back or something. It's like, it is what it is. I'm gonna, try to keep the number of times that happens because of me to a minimum, but it's going to happen, and it's always going to keep happening, because that's music, and you don't always get what you want on the day of, but we try, and I think the track record at our studio has been pretty good as far as what stuff has gotten used, but I guess that's still to be seen.
Yeah. How far are you into this now? A year and a half, 2 years?
Exactly. Yeah. Not even. I don't think even a year and a half.
Wow.
So we've done. I wish I had a tally of like the number of records that we've recorded, but it's been several, and it's more all the time. So.
Well, it really is an incredible space, and I think, one thing I wanted to touch on. Not only is it an amazing resource to have the kind of space in the city, but everyone brings their hidden treasures to you.
Yeah.
Whether that's people or equipment. And there's not a lot of folks that get to see that side, because you're not going to bring your best keys player out to your 11 to 2 a.m. bar gig because he's 79, okay, and he doesn't like to leave the house. But boy, can he play.
Yeah.
And he lives on the street and he loves this. It's like you kind of become similar to attorneys. It's like you're kind of the guy that knows everybody in that point, and you can help push and pull the creative atmosphere of a city in a certain way. You get to have a much wider thumbprint than people would attribute normally. For
sure, yeah, and that's kind of coming. It's crazy, but that it feels like that is kind of becoming part of our role to put factions of the Cincinnati music environment kind of together.
Yeah, and to maintain the Rolodex,
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to kind of ask with. Let me make sure I actually go back to whatever the fuck my question was. Jesus, Matt. Well, just in seeing these different folks come in and make music in the space, like how much you gain to be outside of that room, seeing what's going on in Cincinnati's music scene?
Lately, not really, hardly at all. Which is a shame. I definitely saw a lot more music in 23 and 22 than I have in 24. 24 has been a lot of nights at the studio. It's been a lot of not playing gigs. It's been a lot of doing business stuff regarding the studio, doing post-production, or just like making sure everything's bounced and sent off, or in session a lot. But I think going forward, like there are a few ways to where I'm going to be able to keep the studio operational without me having to operate it all the time.
Nice.
So I think it's really important not to lose touch as to what's going on in the music scene, because I'm in the studio too much. So I do want to be going to shows and stuff a lot more than I have been, and I want to be playing too. That's kind of I guess those two kind of go hand in hand, but
yeah, well, I think it's important when there's certain weekday nights that are really like the agreed times off for musicians, and having places that have a revolving door that continually allow for strange, kind of unorganized shit to happen. Because we put so much of our focus on Thursday through Sunday. That's like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, like we should see each other being vulnerable and kind of odd and mixing and matching between bands, because that's how you really start to notice the similarities between us and some of the larger scenes that we want to compete with. Like at the end of the day, because of the internet, I don't think there's any city that has a ton of edge besides Business Network. And you don't get Business Network to develop unless someone can really see value in the scene and how it sits right now. So coming together on weekdays like that and discussing a new studio that popped up, or a new way of streaming, or a new way of organizing your shows in a way that gets more butts and seats. Like, there's a way of taking the general GDP of the city and starting to inflate it on these off nights by just being friendly to each other. Mm-hmm. And I really do think common players that have no genre limitation and just things to offer, like your space and your team, is a big part of how that happens.
Yeah, for sure. It's really important that different kinds of people meet in the same places and work in the same places, because that's what a scene is, right? Like you can't have a scene without community. Just because people are in the same city, that doesn't mean that they're interacting. And it kind of feels like there's a lot of that not happening. But more and more nowadays, I guess, than maybe the last 5 years, it does seem like things have sort of picked up a little bit, and there's more interesting things happening in music in Cincinnati right now.
Yeah. It'd be really cool if, like, you know, a space similar to yours, or places that had really easy, accessible backline and opportunities said, like, I'm going to pick 5 from the Rolodex once a month and just ask them to be in the room and see what happens with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I always tell people, like, first to listen is the thing that I would pay the most for during the record-making process. To have someone with the vernacular and the willingness to hear something for the first time and start pointing out the glaring shit that I'm too deep in the weeds to notice at this point. It's like, if there was a guy standing on the back of the Titanic, not the wheel, he'd be like, that's a fucking iceberg. You know what I mean? Like, this thing doesn't have to sink if we get far enough away from it. And I think in first interactions, especially when it's as stable an environment as like a beautiful studio, when you put folks that are highly capable in the room, magic just pops out of nowhere. And you need to stimulate it in a way that is unintentional and free. It is like a freestyle in that way.
Yeah.
But it needs to happen more between these odd pockets of Cincinnati that like to pretend they're on the other sides of the earth for some reason, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot there for sure, and there's a lot of stuff that we want to do at the studio to try to, you know, put people together in the same room, whether it's songwriters or musicians, and, you know, have a small audience, and maybe do some videography and you know, high quality audio recording for that. So that's in the plans. We need to figure out exactly how it looks. We're taking the first steps to get there, but that is definitely something. The first thing we did was the Soundwork sessions, which was cool because we got a lot of people, including yourself, able to do just like a really high quality video of whatever tune they've been working on, just to kind of help us out and for us to, you know, make some connections with people. And I think that went really well. The only problem with that is that it was one at a time, you know. There wasn't really a community aspect. There wasn't really any sort of any gathering of people. So that's something that we're working on figuring out and seeing kind of what that looks like.
But I think just in seeing other folks that got to participate in that session, like, and also like that material goes so much farther than just what you kind of planned for. It's like that sits at the top of my EPK right now. That's what I send to venues, and you know, I'm extremely grateful that you would do that kind of thing for many musicians like myself.
Oh, sure.
Because it is content that is a rarity to be offered in that. One of the questions I wanted to kind of ask you earlier is, right now the tendency is for everyone to do the home studio thing, and we all find the glass ceilings that come along with that. Like that song that we did with you, What's Gonna Stop Me? I kind of reached this glass ceiling where I thought I had 10% to go, and I sent the song to Toby Donahue, and I found out that I had 25% of the meat of the song missing. And it's always fun when someone sends you back your song and you're like, I don't know what you did, but boys, it pissed me off. That's so much better. And it's like, some people just have that touch, and you need to take your hands off it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the appropriate blend now for songwriters or bands to go between home spaces and commercial spaces like yours?
Wow, I think there's a lot. Of blend that is really appropriate. I think artists should, musicians should have at least a little bit of proficiency in a DAW. Like, it's 2024, and not only, sure, like, not everybody, you know, expresses themselves that way. That's fine. But I've just seen it firsthand. The artists that can get into Pro Tools and throw down like a quick edit of whatever they're working on, especially arrangement wise, like when an artist has arrangement ideas that they're trying to communicate to an engineer to place, like just the amount of communication that has to happen, even if it's really efficient communication, it still gets in the way. There's still something between idea and manifestation. So you don't have to be an amazing audio engineer. You don't have to be a wizard in a DAW, but, you know, learn how to chop up some stuff. Like, I feel like it works a lot better. And I think most artists that I've worked with can do that. So getting your stuff together, demoing your stuff out at home, I just think that helps. Even if you plan to make your whole record at our space, if you've got demos that you made at home, if you have fleshed out the arrangement, if you fleshed out the tempo, and you know how you want it to feel, the more work you can do at home, the better. It'll save you money too. Like, because that equipment, it's expensive, but like you're gonna make it. The studio time is expensive too, and you can buy a pretty decent amount of studio gear. You can buy a 2x2 and a mic for what it costs to do 4 hours at my studio.
Yeah.
So like,
and if you did that work going in, you'll make 100 times more effective use of the time you're paying for.
Yeah.
It's like I tell a lot of folks that the toiling is not what you should ever put into your studio time. But if you try to toil with guitar in hand vocalizing it, you never get to be on the receiving end of your own voice. And as much as that's trippy and uncomfortable at first, it's an acknowledgement that you need to make to expect anyone to have any understanding of what you're trying to achieve here. Like, especially like, I don't need you to know the vernacular of a crossfade between like some kind of like a linear curve on the way off of something when we're automating it. But if you go in and you at least learn how to say like, okay, right here is where I want these things to kind of cross over, and I want to, suck the air out and push it forward. You taking that time to just get relatively familiar, it's also affirming to producers and engineers that you care enough to look at that.
Yeah, exactly.
I've told a lot of people that in the last couple of years of trying to make my own records down here in my parents' basement, the thing that I've been most affirmed by is trying to do something myself and then knowing why I'm paying someone else to do it. Because you send it off and you don't even know why it's better. You just know it is. And you tried to get there on your own. So instead of saying it's so expensive to send it off to this person, find out why it's so expensive and spend both the bits of money, because next time you won't need to question that process.
Absolutely.
That's my guy. That's my space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you can spend a lot of money and get the wrong kind of expensive, so, but if you have a little bit of terminology stuff, if you have a few things in your brain that you can communicate with an engineer, you can get the kind of expensive that you're after, rather than a mix that does sound expensive but for a different artist or whatever it may be. So like, you can pay a lot of money and have somebody do what is going to be some kind of a good job because they're just good, but being able to communicate with the people that you're working with in terms that they understand, you're just going to get better, more specific sonic results from what you want. So,
and when I was hanging out in your space, like, I was just admiring the many aspects of it. And again, like the love that you poured in, and you can kind of feel it's a family effort. It feels like a family home when you walk in there, and it's efficient and it's clean and it's beautiful. But the thing that really makes it valuable to me was something that you clearly mentioned. It's the line of sight when you're sitting in these spaces. The fact that the room is set up in a way that if you're a tight band and you can play this song and smile at each other while you do it, that's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
It's really hard to describe what that little bit of nuance of. By the time we got in here, we knew we were going to roll 3 takes of this thing all together, and we were going to walk away and it's done. But to be able to look at each other and to know when it's just coming off right, whether it's a snare hit that kicks the spine out of your back, or it's this moment of someone gave a little bit extra and you gave a little bit less, and there was magic.
Yeah.
And if you can't look at each other in that moment, you don't get the difference between that and cramming into a basement room. But because you can see each other, it's just, life is what makes music beautiful. And the people that you play it with. So if there's anything that I would tell people makes your space so much different than anywhere else in the city, it's what they've made Nashville and LA about, which is the same 5 guys pretty much walking here every day, and they look at each other and they smile because they got new tunes to cook and they just roll, baby.
For sure. Yeah, Sightlines definitely, like, my dad and Gavin Haverstick, who did our like acoustic design for us, they figured out how to make it pretty darn good. You can pretty much see anybody you need to see. There's a few blind spots, but I think really there's only like one. And yeah, I love the windows. But yeah, my dad and Gavin, they just kind of plotted it out and figured out what was going to work, and it does.
Yeah.
Definitely does.
So after whatever it is, a family Christmas or a birthday party where you're like, we're about to do something ridiculous and the whole family's on board.
Yeah.
When did you start like window shopping for the building?
Well, my dad did all of that by himself. So he
Rogue. All right.
he was thinking about it for a while. We looked at some buildings close by, and they just weren't quite in good enough shape, or they didn't have the layout that really made sense. So when Larry Paul sold us that house that the studio's attached to, I think he even went into that house and was like, yeah, maybe we could do a studio here, but it won't be blah 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 blah. And then yeah, the decision was made to just build one from the ground up and just
Off
make
the
an
side of the
addition.
house?
Yeah, off the side of the
Interesting.
house.
See, because I thought the infrastructure for that part of the building was there, but now when I think about like the doors on the side and how it worked out like so clean, it's
Yeah.
like it is kind of like a jarring addition to this thing. It's
It
like,
is, yeah. The studio, all the studio part itself was planned as a studio from the ground up. So like the conduit that the audio lines run through from room to room is like poured into the foundation, and like it goes into the concrete and back up. So
That's so satisfying.
so everything is pretty much how, like, during the build process, like, it had to be what it was planned to be, and it pretty much is. There are a few things that we had to change plans on, but for the most part, it's pretty much exactly what it was when it was what it was supposed to be when we broke ground.
Yeah.
So
Has any of like the, from before working in home spaces, working in Nashville spaces, to now being in this pretty custom like kind of room, has your efficiency in how you think about the music different?
I would say yes, but it's more. I would say the way that I hear music is a little different because I'm hyper aware of certain things that cause problems in this specific space, since I've just gotten so many reps with this space. As far as like making a plan for record making, I think, yeah, I've gotten, faster and just different. But as far as listening to music just in general, like, I don't think my perspective has really changed on just listening to music for inspiration or for leisure. Like, I think it's exactly how it was, which I intend to keep it that way. I don't want it to be colored by this like highly technical thing. I want it to be pure and what it is. So
Yeah, but I think you're spot on saying like, I spent so much time in this room that I know the things about this room. I know what the issues and the lovable moments are. So then when you start to listen to, certain storied spaces, whether it's Capitol Studios or it's Muscle Shoals, it's like, what is it that makes this room so special? And it's like, it's because there's a crack in the fucking floor where the kick drum sits, and that thing rattles the whole time.
Yeah.
Like certain problematic aspects of spaces start to become the most endearing parts.
for sure.
Yeah. Are there any like hiccups in the room that you've found yourself loving in time?
I would say not really. I would say everything is coming out pretty clean. The one thing is like I would say that the HVAC is a little. It's not noisy because we can just turn it off because it's mini splits. But I wish you could just leave it on and have it not be noisy. But we just turn them off room by room, so that's a consideration from time to time. The studio, it definitely has a sound. Like, I'm definitely noticing the sonic characteristics of something recorded in that studio. There's definitely some sort of sonic blueprint there. I don't exactly know how to describe it. But as far as hiccups go, I mean, we have that color LED. Sometimes it makes a very, very faint noise. But I mean, the thing is, like, we're going for such a low noise floor in that room that, you know, we make sure the lights are quiet. We make sure everything's quiet as much as we can. But, you know, if there's lights on, there's going to be a little bit of noise. So you kind of hear everything noise-wise. But
yeah, you saying that, like, of all the things, I've never thought about the noise they're making in my space. It's never been the lights, because I always got like a SSD drive just humming in the background. This bitch just working, man.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That or like a laptop fan or HVAC. Yeah, those are all going to be louder. And yeah, the lights, it's not a problem. It's like just straight up not a problem. But oh, there's one thing. So on Wednesdays, on the first Wednesday of every month, the storm siren goes off. And
so mid-session?
It happens at noon every time. So there's a recurring calendar event on my phone that's just like, hey, this siren's going to go off. You're not going to be able to record for 10 minutes.
Yeah, DIN only.
Yeah. That's literally like some really bad thunderstorms. I've heard stuff from outside of the studio, but the storm siren is really the only thing isolation-wise that I've ever seen a problem with. And it is literally, it's the next building over. Like, the fire station is right next door. And like, if you go outside, it's like hurt your ears loud. Like, it's like, I don't want to be out here anymore type loud. But you go inside and you can hear it, but everything else has been pretty quiet. And so unless it's Wednesday at noon, first Wednesday of the month, probably going to be pretty good. Nice. Isolation wise so far.
Yeah. Here's a more personal question for you. What was it like growing up with a stay-at-home dad?
It was pretty cool in a lot of ways. I feel like I ended up like with certain skills just because like there are things that like my dad was doing that maybe if I had a stay-at-home mom in the 90s and the early 2000s, they wouldn't have been doing as much of. Like, so I was always like following him around with the flashlight, like, you know, so I'm pretty okay with tools, I think, probably because I was raised by a stay-at-home dad, like that kind of stuff, like yard work, just these kinds of things, like I feel like I got relatively good at. I think music rubbed off on me a lot more than it would have otherwise, just because he was the musician of the family. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like, I don't really know how it was growing up with a stay-at-home dad because I never grew up any other way. You know, like, I feel like I saw my mom like pretty often. She was working a lot of hours, but somehow I still felt like I saw her a lot. But my dad was driving me around to everything. He coached my baseball team and stuff. Yeah, I mean, great family life growing up. Yeah. Dad did a good job with me and Scott. Overall.
He clearly did a good job. Yeah. You're a good person. You're easy to hang out with. Like,
oh, thank you.
Absolutely, man. My wife was homeschooled, and I always tell her, like, when we meet another homeschool person, and I can look at you two next to each other, I'm like, wow, there are isms to this thing.
Wow.
Like my favorite thing about my wife, because she was homeschooled, is she can teach herself things from books, and that fucks with my head. Like,
that is pretty. Yeah.
I need YouTube University. Yeah. Versus she taught herself organic chemistry in college because her teacher was shitty. And she got like 109 on tests that everyone else failed because she just read through the whole thing. I was like, you're a nut. Like, you realize that. Like, you're an absolute weirdo. And I love that about it.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, our generation kind of watched this chain go from, like, no one wanted to be the stay-at-home parent when we were going through high school and, like, early college. Like, everyone thought, I want to have my career. Versus now, when I see all my friends that are starting to have kids, they would beg to have somebody that could stay home and have their full-time gig be teaching these people how to be people.
Yeah.
Like, my relationship to my mother, because she was there for me every single day, is so different than any other relationship I have. And I wish everyone could experience what it's like to have a parent that's almost always there to answer your questions and be a shoulder to lean on. Like, when I first started to write songs, every single song that I had written, I would play for my mother and my grandmother in the kitchen while they're both just peeling away at something, just making a monstrous dinner for this huge family of ours. And those are some of those sentimental memories to me ever. And like to have a dad that teaches you how to maintain the home through the love language of hard work in that kind of way. Like as an adult, when you two get in the room together, there's just this unspoken thing that you can't really find in other parts of life. But I say this about my mother, and this is a long rant to not really get anywhere, but I love people that has a reservation for depth that they live at. They're not small talk people. They're not going to bullshit you. It's like, I reserve myself for living at a point that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And if we're not going straight there, then I'm walking right by you.
Yeah.
You know, and I assume you and your father are probably at this point with each other where it's like, I got nothing but the truth to tell you right now, the good, bad, and the ugly, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. There's definitely some of that. I would say, that we're pretty honest with each other at this point. But you know, we still talk about stupid stuff. Definitely, there's no reservation for intellectual depth.
Yeah.
but definitely for honesty and truth. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think of the playfulness too. Like the person that saw you be a child never loses that vision of you as like someone to fuck with in a really great way. Like
that's true.
Like me and my mom. We sat on the phone the other day for 40 minutes laughing at the fact that my sister got ordained to do one of her friends' weddings.
Wow.
And I love friends that can officiate other folks' weddings.
Yeah.
I grew up Catholic. Did you grow up Catholic as well?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
no.
Man, it's a hell of a call. We do a good job. It's a fun time. So like, you know, a wedding is such a particular thing in my mind. But when I see my sister doing it, I'm like, this is crazy, you know. And my mom accidentally, I think, called her an internet rabbi, which I was like, that's forever the term. That's so funny. She'd be like, dude, I became an internet rabbi the other day. And so yeah, but like just having that willingness to like, we don't need to talk about anything deep, you know, just to be like, I'm not gonna pretend like that wasn't hilarious, and I'm gonna make fun of you for life. For this thing,
for sure, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's it like to work with your brother in such an emotionally driven but like very high stakes profession?
I would say that it's been pretty effective because most of working with Scott has been Scott telling me how to do things. And then I'm just doing them and he's in LA, you know? So like he's definitely shown me a few things like here and there, like in person. I mean, I guess a lot of stuff over the years. I mean, he's my brother, so he probably showed me how to do some things on drums or guitar when I was like 8. So have to count that stuff. But
I'm sure he's kept a tally. You know?
Yeah, maybe.
So he's
His tally
still
and my
based in
tally
LA.
might look different. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's in LA. Yep. He works in LA. He's been working for a guy named David Schwartz, who does like TV music, sitcom music,
cool
documentaries. They just did that Pete Rose documentary that came out.
That's sick.
Yeah,
What a
which
great
is cool.
Cincinnati homecoming moment.
Yeah, it's just kind of random. He just happened to be from Cincinnati, and they got that documentary. So
yeah.
It's been mostly he's been like he's been doing that LA music scene audio engineering thing for a long time, a lot longer than me. He's 5 years older than me. So yeah, I mean there's a lot about recording and audio engineering that I've been able to learn from him like directly because he's really great at it. Their turnaround times in that industry are nuts. So
yeah. So do you do that in like a Zoom call where you give them access to your computer and like
sometimes not as often as we've probably done that like 5 times.
Okay.
But yeah, he actually has run some sessions with Cincinnati musicians for his own stuff or some of the TV stuff like from LA because we do it that way. I mean, they did it. Everything was done that way over COVID. You know, you just use TeamViewer and do like audio movers, listen to, and it's all remote recording. You can totally do that now.
TeamViewer is the shit too.
Yeah.
Like to have you go take over the space and set it all up and just be like, all right, I'll come back in a couple hours when you need me to break down booms, but like that is what it is.
Yeah, so it's like I can just engineer from Cincinnati and he can produce or do whatever he needs to do from LA and he can run the session. I'll just turn the preamp knobs and set up the mics. So that's happened maybe once or twice.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And it probably works better to not be in the room with your big brother in those moments where it's like we probably have a good working relationship, but it's like some delegation that feels like you're
definitely. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that, you know, like there's all kinds of just like vibe stuff that like you gotta figure out for yourself sometimes. You know, you can't, like, if your big brother's around, like there's certain things that you'll never learn with your big brother in the room, you know what I mean, like but I mean,
can't get a fish off the hook, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get this bitch. One time when I was a kid, my brother took me fishing, and I got a hook into my thumb, and I saw it through the top of my thumbnail. And I've always been terrified of fishing hooks since then. It's like, it's one of those childhood fears where it's like, I just rather not even approach it, you know? Like, it's forever in there. I'm not getting it out, you know? It's emotionally still in my thumb.
Wow.
Some dumb shit, you know?
Wow. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, what do you see as the next big step for the studio?
Man, I think, I mean, we've been so busy over the last couple months that really it's just kind of refining our business model and, like, getting together some of our like, initial plans that we, you know, set out to do, which include things like having, like, a live performance sort of aspect to what we do and getting musicians in the room and getting it on. It's like we were talking about earlier. So getting stuff set up for that kind of thing, and other just sort of general, like, putting juice in the scene sort of ventures. But I think as far as, like, the business and, like, how often we're booked, we're at, like, a good place to where if we can maintain what we're doing and maintain good relationships with all the clients we have and, like, kind of slowly increase our clientele, like, we don't need more business, like, desperately, like, in this particular moment. So this is kind of a, like, gather up all of your resources, figure out what you want to do next, plan for the next little paradigm, because things are definitely changing really quickly. We're a lot busier than we've been in the past, so I feel like we can kind of venture into our more serious aspirations at this point. So figuring out what that looks like is what we're doing now.
Yeah, and if folks want to come knocking on the front door of asking about the business and whatnot, where should they go to?
Just go to legacysoundworks.com.
Fantastic.
Or at Legacy Soundworks on Instagram. Those are the best. We have Facebook too.
Don't reach out on Facebook. But we don't trust your business.
You're going to have a better time probably on those other platforms.
Yes.
That's just the honest truth.
A quicker response.
Yeah.
And make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel. That's linked below on this video.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming by today, man. I think y'all have an incredible space, a great team, and just an incredible. I feel incredibly fortunate to have that around, and I know it's going to be one of those things that propels the city forward in a lot of different ways.
Wow.
So.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on. This has been a blast.
Absolutely. Pimps, players, and affiliates have a beautiful week. I'll catch you soon.